Hello, welcome to my channel, Another Bibliophile Reads. My name is Greg, and in March I will be celebrating the biggest BookTube event of the year, and that is March of the Mammoths, sometimes known as Marching Mammoths. This is where creators and readers and watchers are encouraged to read a mammoth book. A mammoth book is either a work of fiction or nonfiction that is 800 or more pages long. This event encourages people to pick up those really large books that are somewhat intimidating because of their length and get into the book. Because reading a long book can actually be very rewarding. It allows the reader to dive in and delve into a subject matter or a story in such detail that it totally absorbs you. It takes most people a while to read a mammoth, but there's such a reward in just sitting down and knowing you have a lot of book to read. And there's just such an enjoyment in that. Now, as I said, it can be fiction or nonfiction. I'm currently holding up a book that I want to read someday. It is Black Lamb and Gray Falcon by Rebecca West. It is 1,150 pages of text. If you add in the endnotes, it's 1,181 pages. Now, the issue with this is, of course, the size of the print. Get out my reading glasses. But this is a history of Yugoslavia. It was written in the early part of the 20th century. And it is a book I do want to read one day. Probably not this year, but it's definitely a mammoth and a good contender. Another contender for this year is going to be a reread for me. It is Dhalgren by Samuel R. Delany. This is sort of a postmodern science fiction novel. Some people say it's not truly science fiction, that it's literary fiction, sort of with science fictional elements. I think it's both, because a book can be both literary and science fiction at the same time, about a city somewhere in the Midwest that's sort of lost in time, maybe. Very hard to describe. And it's postmodern because of the way Samuel Delany wrote this book. If you open up to the first page, you will read a sentence. And the sentence is a fragment. It's the last half of a sentence. To wound the autumnal city. And if you go to the very last page, which on this edition is page 879, you get the first part of that sentence. So it goes in a cycle, very much like James Joyce's Finnegan's Wake. I also have this edition of Dhalgren. This one is annoyingly only 799 pages long because the text is a bit bigger and easier on my old eyes. Either way, I'd count it as a mammoth. Now, here's a book that I absolutely love to read. Another postmodern novel. And this one is 1,192 pages long. Women and Men by Joseph McElroy. As I understand it, this is a story of a woman and a man in New York City. I believe they live in the same apartment building, but they never meet. But it tells their two stories. Really supposed to be fascinating, but this is a chunker. Exercise lifting this book. Now, here's another book I want to read someday. Definitely a mammoth at 1,463 pages long. This is Poor Fellow, My Country by Xavier Hebert. This is supposedly the Australian masterpiece of literature. It is their seminal work that describes their country. And it was written early in the or mid 20th century. Now, the problem is not only is this 1,463 pages long, if you think the Black Lamb, Black Falcon had small text, just look at the size of that text. It's just like you can get two normal book pages on one of these pages. So this is an absolute ginormous book. I think calling it a mammoth is an understatement. I really need to pick up an ebook version. As far as I know, ebook versions are not available in the United States. So probably have to put this one on hold. And then there is Miss MacIntosh, My Darling, by Marguerite Young. I think this is considered the longest novel ever written by a woman. It is 1,198 pages long. I don't really know if it qualifies as the longest novel. There may be some fantasy novels written by women that are a bit longer. But this is, again, another postmodern novel. It is the story of a woman taking a bus trip to visit her old nanny. And it's all her thoughts and memories while she's on this bus. And yet, again, there are some issues with these big books and print size. There's also Seveneves by Neal Stephenson. He is a science fiction author. He always writes big books. I remember ordering this book when it first came out and pre-ordering it, and I never got around to reading it. And this is a svelte mammoth. This is only 867 pages long. And what's really good is the print is at a reasonable length. You can read that book. What about this one? This is Children of Pride by Robert Manson Myers. This is a work of nonfiction. It is essentially his editing of family letters from the South during the Civil War. He won the National Book Award for this. And it's broken up conveniently into 3 volumes. The entire length is of the text is 1,445 pages long, but with endnotes, it's 1,845 pages long. And I do want to get to this, mainly because he was one of my writing professors in university, and he really was not a very good writing professor. He was extremely pompous. And he was one of those writing professors who says, if I see a spelling mistake in your papers, I'm going to give you an F and stop reading. He didn't actually do that, because when I write papers, I am just chock full of spelling errors because I'm a bad speller. But I managed to pass his course, and I still want to read this book someday. Let's look at this. A Sorrow in Our Hearts, The Life of Tecumseh. This is by Allan W. Eckert. This is a biography of Tecumseh. It is 814 pages of text, 1,062 pages with index and endnotes. Text size, it's okay. It's reasonable for a mass market paperback. Another great choice. But ultimately, the book I am going to be reading for March of the Mammoths is Shantaram by Gregory David Roberts. This book comes highly recommended by my buddy, Allan, at Big Hard Books and Classics, and it is going to be a buddy read for us. So beginning in March, I am going to be starting Shantaram. It is 936 pages long. It is a semi-autobiographical novel of the narrator, who was an Australian. Where was he living? In Shanghai. He got into some legal trouble, had to go to jail, and got out of jail not exactly in the legal manner. as I understand. And it's supposed to be just a fast-answered book, according to Allan. So I'm looking forward to this as my mammoth. And that is just my pitch and my possibilities for March of the Mammoth. Your choices can be completely different from my own. So, what is your mammoth for March? I hope everyone will try it. Now, you don't have to finish the book in March. You just have to start reading the book in March and take as long as you need to finish that long book. Well, anyway, thank you for watching and keep on reading Mammoth Books.